Are children actually getting sex-changing surgery? No reasonable doctor would agree to perform a permanent sex reassignment surgery on a child. There are a few things here. First, no, it is not common practice to perform surgical transition on a minor. The largest exception to this is among infants. Infants who are born intersex are often surgically corrected to one gender or the other. Second, certain political groups are pushing the narrative that surgical transition is the entirety of gender-affirming healthcare. This is not true. Gender-affirming healthcare encompasses many different things. And while what I'm about to describe is an ideal case, it's also a pretty typical one. When a person first starts showing signs of being trans, the first step in their care is social transition. This usually means picking a new name, dressing differently, getting your hair cut differently, etc. All stuff that's trivially easy to just reverse if it turns out being trans isn't for you. If the person showing signs of being trans is a prepubescent child or adolescent, that person is often put on puberty blockers. These are medicines that have been in common use for decades. They pause puberty, with minimal long-term effects. This gives the person time to figure themselves out and really decide what to do. And like social transition, it's easily reversible. Just stop the medicine, and puberty picks back up where it left off. That is the kind of medical, non-psychological care a 13-year-old might get. After that, and typically no earlier than like 16 or 17, the person is placed on hormone replacement treatment. This is after they've had several years of social transition and know what they're getting into. For many trans people, this is the end of their transition. While it's common to eventually undergo surgical transition, it's also common not to. Those people who do undergo surgical transition are almost invariably adults. So, if minors' gender-affirming care is primarily social transition and psychological evaluation, why not, as you said, just allow them to identify as whoever they want? But wait until adulthood for physical alterations? There's a simple answer for that. Puberty. Puberty is the time of your life when you develop secondary sex characteristics. And among trans people, it's usually a special kind of hell. I'm not trans personally, so I don't have any first-hand experience. But the best way it's been described to me is Kafkaesque. Imagine if you woke up one morning with dog paws for hands. Imagine waking up every morning, and maybe your face is just a little longer. There's a little nub over your tailbone that gets just a little bigger every day. Your fingers get just a little smaller. Your palm gets a little firmer. Your hands get a little furrier every day. You're turning into a dog. Your body is changing into something it's not supposed to be. Something that doesn't at all represent who you are. And you can't stop it. And meanwhile, everyone around you is telling you that it's natural, that you'll enjoy being a dog, that you'd look so good in a little bandana. Trans youth are at an incredibly high risk of suicide. And it's not all to do with bullying or social acceptance. Trans kids' bodies are changing in ways that usually cause a deep-seated feeling of horror to them, which is often the driving force behind their suicide. Gender-affirming treatment, particularly puberty blockers at first and hormone treatment later, is incredibly important, because it stops the body from developing in ways that cause significant distress to the person. That can't be alleviated in other ways. And it's generally only after those other ways have been tried that the decision to go with puberty blockers or hormones is made. So to answer your question, we don't wait for them to be adults because doing so is beyond cruel. We have the technology to hit the pause button and let them figure it out. There have been a lot of good answers here, but I just wanted to throw this in. I'm the parent of a transgender person. He was 19 when he transitioned. This is not a process that is done without an enormous amount of planning and thought. The insurance company demanded letters from 2 physiologists, one of whom had to be a PhD level. A letter from his doctor and a letter from the endocrinologist that was just to allow him to start testosterone. He then had what little breast tissue there was removed. Then he had his ovaries removed. Insurance didn't cover either of those surgeries. He paid for those himself. This was happening while he was a college student. He graduated with honors. By the way, he continues to see a therapist once a week and he's a much happier person now. Before transitioning, he was depressed, miserable and suicidal. While I had to mourn the loss of a daughter, having this version of him is worth it. It is important to clarify that children are not getting sex-changing surgery in the sense that they are not undergoing full gender reassignment surgeries. However, some transgender children may receive hormone therapy or puberty blockers under the guidance of medical professionals to help alleviate gender dysphoria, which is a term used to describe the distress and discomfort that some transgender individuals experience due to the mismatch between their gender identity and the sex they were assigned at birth. Hormone therapy involves the use of hormones, such as estrogen or testosterone, to align an individual's body with their gender identity. Puberty blockers, on the other hand, are medications that temporarily halt the onset of puberty. They can be helpful for transgender youth who experience distress during puberty due to the development of sex characteristics that are not congruent with their gender identity. It is important to note that these medical interventions are only offered after a thorough evaluation by trained medical professionals and with the consent of the child and their parents or legal guardians. The decision to pursue hormone therapy or puberty blockers is not made lightly, and it is based on each individual's unique circumstances. Edit. I'm trans. MTF. And currently going through the trans healthcare process right now. I am 30 years old if that helps give perspective. EDIT2. I added some stuff and reworded it a bit because I suck at getting thoughts down lol. No, nobody sane in the trans community supports these surgeries before you're at the age of medical consent. There are some areas where the age of medical consent is as low as 16. But even then, doctors aren't going to put you under the knife at 16 unless it is literally life or death. There are weirdos out there who do think trans surgeries should happen earlier than that. But until doctors are saying this, it's just nonsense. If medical professionals end up doing studies and research and determine that 16 is the earliest age that it's safe to give this healthcare to, then so be it. You, I, or anyone else that isn't a doctor should not be making these decisions. The vast majority of the trans community also doesn't think you should be putting kids under the knife. But our opinions do not trump medical fact. If medical research says to intervene younger, then we should. If it says to intervene older, then we do that. A lot of thought has gone into trans healthcare, much like every other aspect of healthcare. And the practices in place are said to be perfectly fine according to the doctors who write the guidelines. How we feel about medicine is irrelevant. We all feel like doing surgery on a child is wrong. But then is it okay if it's extracting a tumor? What if it's removing tonsils? The tumor will kill the child. The tonsillitis can kill the child. The distress from being trans without handling it will kill the child. So often, in fact, that people throw the suicide stat at us as an insult. Why are we arguing about one of these things but not the others? The only difference I see here is that one of these things has been dragged onto the political stage to be determined by politicians. Meanwhile, all the other medical interventions are decided by medical professionals. Given we aren't having this discussion over the dozens of other surgeries and medical stuff that kids go through, The argument against trans healthcare should include all medical care at any age under medical age of consent. The problem that people seem to have with this isn't the age or the medicine. It's literally just because it's trans people. Nothing more. I've yet to see Tucky Boy yell on Fox News about all the kids getting facial plastic surgery when they are under 10 years old to correct soft palate issues. Or all the kids who get eye surgery to help them see. Or have adenoids, tonsils removed. Or the dozens and dozens of other major medical procedures done on children to improve, save their lives. The reason nobody talks about the dozens of surgeries that children go under is because there isn't a ton of political outrage over them. The argument against trans healthcare is a political one. The medical professionals who went to school for decades to practice medicine all seem to have the same ideas about when trans healthcare is necessary and the processes to go through. A lot of the surgery we do on children to save them is in itself life-threatening. But we do it anyways because if it works, it helps the kid. Nobody seems to bat an eye at any of that. I have yet to hear someone who is mad about trans healthcare for kids being mad about all the other more risky surgeries we do to kids regularly. TL. Doctor. No doctor is putting children under the knife to do gender reassignments or mastectomies. The only reason we are even talking about this is because people decided to make being trans a political issue instead of a medical one. And so now you hear about trans healthcare being evil, or trans healthcare being good. And meanwhile doctors aren't listening to any of that because politics and the practice of medicine have nothing to do with each other. When you mix politics and medicine, you get dumbasses like the anti-vax crowd and anti-trans crowd, who ignore all medical research, testing, doctors, etc., and instead listen to the news as if it is medical fact. Nope. Surgery isn't. My cousin is a pediatric endocrinologist who specializes in gender-affirming treatment. I get a lot of great info from her. It's not happening. There may be puberty blockers to give kids more time to figure stuff out, but those are totally reversible. Maybe this is a side conversation, but parents make irreversible decisions for their infant kids about their genitals every day. Has no one else heard of circumcision? An absolutely tiny amount of people are trans. This is not a regular thing. It's just moral panic from right-wing weirdos. It's a concerted culture war effort drummed up by the GOP to distract from actual issues. Like when one state made a huge thing about banning transgender from competitive sports. It was after literally one kid wanted to compete. There may be some teens getting gender-affirming hormone treatments or exploring surgery. But it's handfuls at most, not 100s. Not 1000s. And the issue is that the GOP often uses age as a wedge. Start by prohibiting it in kids under 12, then under 15, then 18, then adults. Look at Florida's "Don't Say Gay" laws. That started with young kids, and then once those are in place, it's a beachhead for new or changed laws. Jazz Jennings had SRS at 17, after being puberty suppressed since 11. To put it into context, there are only about 300 transition surgeries among teens in the US per year, and nearly all of them are 17 plus. Edit. This number is just among teens. It's a growing area. Children's Hospital Boston just had a formal national press release on expanding services in this area. I think trans people getting bottom surgery even as an adult is really rare. All I hear about is HRT. Let's do the breakdown. Some children do get gender reassignment surgery prior to puberty for medical reasons. typically if they are intersex or experiencing severe gender dysphoria. The vast majority of trans children are placed on puberty blockers, which are designed to hold off the onset of puberty. Rather than get sex reassignment surgery right off the bat, children are far more likely to socially transition first, dressing as their preferred gender expression, choosing a new name, etc. Let's clear some of the misconceptions up. First, you cannot just walk into a doctor's office, being a child or otherwise, and demand to have a gender reassignment surgery. There are procedures involving counseling and evaluations before such a solution would ever be considered, let alone scheduled. The average time between a person and provider deciding gender reassignment surgery should be the next step, and the surgery itself averages out to 2.9 years. That information is for the US specifically. Also in the US, the average age of individuals getting gender reassignment surgery is 33. And the data is also available at the link above. Gender dysphoria, which has been seen in children as young as 7, before even precocious puberty, is a very real and life-altering thing. In a study on trans individuals that is published on the NIH website, 41% of respondents remembered feelings of gender dysphoria at age 7. And for 80% of respondents, those feelings were among their earliest childhood memories. Providing data is one thing, but understanding it is another. Based on the above provided information, several conclusions can be drawn. First, getting a gender reassignment surgery is not simple, easy, or cheap, which makes clear that someone who goes through it has a strong conviction that they were born in a body that does not match who they are. People do not commit to, nor go through, a 3-year wait, hormone replacement therapy, counseling, and constant doctor's visits throughout on a whim. This is further illustrated by a 1% detransition rate post-surgery. Second, gender dysphoria appears early, leaves a lasting impression, and in many cases does not go away. This is further illustrated by data that shows that gender-affirming care leads to lower suicidal ideation and psychological stress compared to individuals that experience gender dysphoria and do not receive gender-affirming care. That lower level of suicidal ideation is not solely a short-term change, as those who received gender-affirming care showed lower levels of lifetime suicidal ideation. Additionally, gender reassignment surgery is only one type of gender-affirming care, and it is not always the answer. There is a lot of misinformation going around as certain people in power seek yet another group they can otherize to make them the enemy to unite their base. As always, compassion and knowledge are the greatest antidote to hate, and media literacy and the ability to do research on a topic is the first step towards that. Sex-changing surgery. Define sex-changing surgery. You have a lot of answers here that are intentionally vague about terms. Cutting off the breasts? Yes, this happens a lot. Puberty blockers and hormonal therapy? Yes, this happens a lot. Cutting off penises and forming new vaginas? No, this does not happen often, even for adults. But do all these therapies have life-defining and irreversible aftermath? Also, yes, and a lot of them happen before a person even turns 18. As a trans teen, no one under the age of 18 is getting a sex change. There are hormone pills that will stop puberty from happening, but those can be reversed by just not taking the pill. So I researched this today. I cannot find a single reference to a trans person under 18 ever having their genitalia modified. I did, however, find some stats on mastectomies performed on teenagers under 18. In 2012, there were 42,000 people diagnosed with gender dysphoria. That same year, there were either 212 or 230 prophylactic mastectomies performed on people under 18. It is a ridiculously small number. If you take half of the 42,000 and then look what percentage of people had the surgery, it is 0.008%. Those numbers are misleading though, because the 42,000 were only newly diagnosed people under 18. So the number is higher for trans people. So let's say 60,000. Cut it in half, male and female, and do the same math. 0.004%. Bottom surgery for trans people under 18. I couldn't find a number. Top surgery. Yes. But a very small part of the trans population. For reference, there were 4,700 breast reduction surgeries in the US last year on girls under 18. There were a few breast augmentations as well. No, young children are not being given sex change operations. Prepubescent kids can be given puberty blockers. But all those meds do are put off puberty. Once the meds are stopped, the individual will go through puberty. It isn't permanent. It can be helpful, though, for kids who are trans. Because once they go through puberty, you can't undo it without surgery. For a trans boy, growing breasts could cause body dysphoria. Some hospitals had a policy of some gender-affirming surgery for 16 and up. But the same lawmakers who want that stopped are the same ones who say that a 16-year-old can be tried as an adult. So we need consistency. Either under 18 or children, or 16 and up, can make some decisions for themselves. A lot goes into prep for gender-affirming surgery, including psychological testing. It isn't done on a whim. From 20,172,021, 121,882 children, 617, were diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Of that, 121,882 children diagnosed in that period, 4,780 were prescribed puberty blockers in the same period. 14,726 were started on a hormone treatment during the same period. The data on minors that had surgery is only a 3-year period from 20,192,021. In that period, only 56 genital surgeries were performed, while 776 mastectomies were performed in that same period. So while genital reassignment surgery does occur in children in the US, it only occurs for 0.045% of children that are given the diagnosis of gender dysmorphia. Reuters had a pretty good write-up that I sourced the numbers above from. https://investigates/special report/USA-transyouth-data/. I'm trans and it's not easy to get care at all. I'm an adult but I'm having to go private. There is a 7-year wait on the NHS. And have to have 2 psychological tests in order to get hormones and surgery. Teenagers are given puberty blockers if needed, fully reversible, and HRT if they are older, 16 plus. I wouldn't be here without the knowledge that I could get the treatment and help I need.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.